Welcome to Play by Players, an MLSPA podcast. This show is brought to you by the players and is all about the players, both past and present, who have plied their trade in MLS. You'll hear about each player's journey into the game, their careers and life after the game, on the field and off. It's all on the table. Now here's your host, former MLS player, Bobby Boswell.
Welcome back to another episode of Play by Players. I am the host, Bobby Boswell. Today we are joined by a fellow defender currently playing at MLS for FC Dallas. He has played over 200 professional games in Denmark, in Iceland, in Major League Soccer, USL, NASL. He's a former youth national team player, hopefully a full team's men's national player here in the coming years. But he's won an MLS championship. He's won a supporter shield. He was named Defender of the Year in the USL. If they gave out an award for best dressed in MLS, I'm sure he would be a finalist. Please welcome to the podcast, Sebastien Ibeagha.
Appreciate that intro.
Yeah, that way you gave me a lot of good stuff here. You've got a pretty good resume so far. And how you doing? How's everything going?
Good. Just obviously got traded to Dallas this year, so just kind of settling down and taking things day by day. But yeah, can't complain. Enjoying the new scenes and everything, new teammates. So it's been good.
Yeah, congrats on the new contract. I know that was always that's always a great thing for guys when they get a new deal, and you're in a new environment where I feel like you have an open slate to kind of go in and show what you can do. So do you feel like it's the same thing here?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the way our club is run with Nico and Andre, or the GM, have it kind of set up, it's anyone can play. It's all about putting the best 11 players out there, and that's kind of what they want to do. So as you said, open slate, try and perform the best of my ability and get on the field as much as I can.
Awesome. Well, that's where we are now. Let's go back to where we started. We'll take everyone through your journey, and you've got a pretty unique story, and I'm really excited to let the fans hear about it. So your journey begins back in Nigeria, a country that, as most people know, is got a very rich soccer culture. I know you moved away at a relatively young age, but what can you tell us about your first memories of living in the African continent and playing soccer? I'm assuming that's where your soccer journey started for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was just home. Like as anyone reflects back to like their hometowns and home countries, it was just that comfortable feeling of just being around family and friends. I was just always with my brother mainly. He also played, but my mom was also an athlete. My dad played in college a little bit, but my mom played tennis, so it was always a very athletic family, and that's kind of how we bonded a lot when we were little.
Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder. I was going to say, I think she played a little bit professionally, right? She was a really good tennis player. And, I know your brother. I know y'all are very competitive. Would you say that you got your competitive instinct from your parents? And if so, is there one parent, because your dad played, I think, at the University of Nigeria, played soccer.
Yeah.
I have to imagine they're both pretty competitive. Where did you guys get it? Was it a combination, or is it one or the other?
I think it's definitely a combination. I think they're competitive in different ways. And yeah, I think my brother and I were able to pick up on the different ways, I guess, to be competitive. Oh, I say different ways. I just mean like in certain aspects of like life. Like I think trend towards the more competitive in actual like sports or like physical stuff. My brother, he was the same way, but he also translated that to like in the classroom and stuff. He was a very, very good student and stuff like that. So I was like mediocre. I didn't really care about that as much. But yeah, I think it was those kind of two differing types of competitiveness that we kind of took.
Selling yourself a little short there, as we'll find out here in a little bit. I know you're a golf enthusiast, but can you hang on the tennis court too, or did that not get ingrained in you?
I used to. I don't know about now. I haven't played in a while, to be honest. But okay. Yeah, when I was younger, I could definitely hang. I don't know about now.
Your father was in oil and gas, and as a person that lives in this part of the country, I meet people all the time that get relocated to Texas from all over the world, Texas, Oklahoma, anywhere in the, Louisiana for oil and gas. In your case, you ended up moving from Nigeria to Oklahoma. What do you remember about that It's got to be just a fascinating move in that you're like, oh, I'm going to the U.S. Like you probably know New York and Miami and L.A. and it's like we're going to Oklahoma.
Yeah, it was definitely culture shock. Obviously, you go from Africa to a small city called Elk City, which is on the western border of Oklahoma, and like me and my brother were kind of like we were the only like two black kids in the school, so it's like it was a complete 180, like complete culture shock. But I think moving to such a small city kind of helped us, gain confidence in our new culture, basically. And so it wasn't difficult. I wouldn't say it was difficult, but it was just getting used to our new environment and stuff like that. And I think being in the places that we live, it being Oklahoma, which is random, but I think that helped us kind of grow and kind of understand our surroundings a little bit better at that age.
I'm assuming y'all played soccer there. Was it, were you able to find like a competitive thing, or were y'all already standing out as being better than everybody, or how did you feel your development happened there?
I don't actually think I developed that much there. I think we did play, but it was more like on a very club level, not even like well, I guess they didn't really have academies yet, but it wasn't like that higher club level yet. So it was just kind of just playing. And then once we moved from there to closer to Oklahoma City, it's kind of where my brother and I were put into better clubs. And that's really where kind of development started.
Okay. And how long were y'all in Oklahoma? I think you had a really tough, I always say I don't want to move my kids when they're before high school. And if I'm correct, y'all moved, I think your brother was a little bit older, but you moved in the middle of high school, right?
Yeah, I moved to Houston going into my junior year of high school, yeah.
And that had to be pretty hard, right? I mean,
yeah.
I'd imagine you establish your friends and you've got, things going on, and then you pick up and, were you pretty devastated about moving again, or was it, were you open-minded with it? What was your mindset there?
I was definitely devastated. Like you said, I mean, we were in Oklahoma for, 8 years, I think. So I had a pretty good and solid friend group and stuff like that. So kind of, again, resetting now that I'm older and I understand more was a lot harder, definitely. But looking back on it, I think it helped me in terms of like soccer, because I just kind of switch and just focus solely on soccer. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and then you kind of talked about there weren't really academies then. You were kind of in this cool like first group, the first generation. I say, first, second group that really came through the academy. You get to Houston. I think you were in Mo City, right? Like, yeah. And you went to Hightower. We'll talk a little bit about that, but you end up coming in, and that's where our paths crossed, where you were in the academy. Were you excited to be, talk to me about finding out there's this academy? And I know they were excited to have you. It's like you fell in their lap, where this guy moved here and now he's really talented. We want him on the team. But what were you thinking in terms of, oh, there's this pro team here, and I can go train with the group of guys that trains below them?
No, yeah, I think I love that. I mean, as a young player, that wants to end up playing professional, I think academies are huge. Obviously, they're the link between youth soccer and the full team. So I think for me, it was kind of, I don't know, bittersweet because I didn't want to move, but the fact that I was able to join an academy like that, I think was huge for my development and kind of my thought process of, oh, there is a way and there is a path that I can actually see to get to the pro level.
Okay. Well, I know you did really well with the academy. I think were you already in the national? I think you were U15, or where'd you start? Where'd you start with the national team program?
Yeah.
So you were already kind of entrenched in that. And did you know any of these guys here? I mean, it was kind of a different group. You were much more. I felt more physical, and you just had a more mature game about you than a lot of the guys that were here.
Yeah. I didn't know. No, in the academy, I didn't really know anyone until I actually joined the academy, and obviously they're your teammates, so you know them. But yeah, before that, I didn't know really any of the players there. I didn't really know the style that Houston really played. It was just kind of, this is a great opportunity that not a lot of players get at that age. So I just try to ingrain myself in that system and learn as much as I can and perform to the best of my ability. Yeah.
All right. Well, I know you joined the first team in trainings, and I think you played in some preseason games. Your academy team had tournaments both domestically and internationally. I know you excelled in those. What do you remember most? You seem to be. I'm always torn with the academy stuff because I've been pretty vocal that I always think guys should play high school soccer just because that's where they should be around their friends. And I know a lot of the academies they don't like that. But how do you feel? Are you a pretty big advocate for it? You sound like you liked it and you're talking nicely about it.
Yeah, I guess I'm talking nicely about it because in my circumstance, I ended up playing professionally. I could see it being detrimental to kids who that option doesn't become available, because then you literally, like you just said, you're not playing high school soccer, you're not around those friends, it's a different group who then go the separate ways if they all go to college. And so I could see both sides, but I think for a kid whose main goal is to make it pro and they're willing to kind of do anything, I think it's a great way because it gives you, like I said before, a straight path from youth to full team.
Okay. I like that. When you were playing with that, you're in the national pool at this point, you're training with the academy, you're excelling. I think you were, player of the tournament and you got MVP for the academy team. You do well when you come up to the first team. Did you kind of believe, did you kind of always know, like even when you were younger, or did you start believing then, like, this is like, I have what it takes to be a pro, I'm going to be a professional soccer player at that point? Or was it just still about, I'm just having fun, and if it works out, it works out?
I think once I joined the academy and started playing well, it was like, oh, I do have like what it takes to be a professional. I know I'm not there yet. I'm still 16, 17, 18. So I know I wasn't there yet, but it was, okay, these are the first steps and I can see these first steps being taken. And now I just have to like keep kind of pushing in that sense. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about high school. I talked about Hightower. I live near Hightower, so we go to their football games sometimes. Awesome. My daughter loves the cheerleaders, and it's a good show there. It's a great stadium, a pretty impressive sporting facility for a high school. Yeah. Did you play football there too?
I didn't. So I stopped playing football when I moved to Texas.
Yeah, I was gonna say because it's pretty big. Texas football is pretty crazy.
That's when I was like, yeah, Texas football is serious. I don't think it's gonna help me. Yeah, that one.
Well, I was gonna laugh and say if the academy wouldn't let you play clubs or high school soccer, but if you had to play football, but you were a DB or
yeah, I was a corner. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I bet you were pretty good at that. Well, anyway, let's talk about you're at Hightower, the Hurricanes. What do you remember, like as a a guy that's getting ready to go to college? You're in the national pool. I'm assuming you have a lot of offers to go to college. What do you remember about the lead up to making a decision on going to college?
I think it was just don't mess anything up, really. It was just kind of focus on, the academic side of it and try and get like the best SAT scores or ACT scores I could. And just keep performing on the soccer field, but also start to perform better in the classroom. And that was kind of the main thing. And that was kind of what my parents were just drilling into me was, hey, you have to be better in the classroom. I was like, okay, I got it. But yeah.
Well, you joke about Christian, your brother, being the academic, but you ended up at a pretty good school. How did you decide that you wanted to go to Duke? Was it his influence in terms of, I think he was there already, right?
Yeah.
Like how did you have other offers? Did you feel like you could have gone, did you have your pick of it? Like I didn't have any ACC offers to go play soccer. I would have loved to have gone and played in the ACC, but how did that come about?
They actually recruited me very late in the cycle. I hadn't committed or even verbally committed, but my top school was Stanford. And then Wake Forest was another one that came in. And I was like, oh, they're in the ACC. I'd be kind of close to my brother. So I was like, that's cool. And then, so my top choice was still Stanford. And then Stanford was like, oh, we're only going to give you a 70% scholarship. And I was like, but my brother like goes to college for free. I'd rather try and find another option to do that. And so I just kind of waited it out. And then really late in the recruiting cycle, dude was like, hey, we want you to come here. Obviously your brother's here, so you're kind of, comfortable with the idea, the campus. And I'm like, yeah. And then they also offered a full ride. So pretty much immediately I was like, yeah, at that time I was 18. I hadn't played a single game with my brother growing up at all. So I was like, ooh, this is a chance to at least play a couple games with him, maybe. Is his senior year, my freshman year. And yeah, and that was kind of like the main thing was like, I just wanted to play or have a season with my brother. Yeah.
I always joke and say Duke is kind of a fun school to hate in American culture. I don't know why, but it's just kind of, I don't make the rules. I just, participate sometimes. Did you have any idea? It's obviously a prestigious school for a lot of reasons, academically, athletically. When you think of soccer powerhouses, you kind of think of the ACC, but it's more like the Marylands and the UVAs. But Duke has produced a lot of talented players in MLS like yourself. How do you feel about your time there in terms of development as not only a soccer player, but, as a person?
Yeah, no, I think in both those categories I developed a lot. I think I went in kind of thinking that I could do whatever I wanted. And it was very, I guess it brought me back down to earth to understand that even if you're a good athlete or you're good at whatever you do, you still have to perform, and just your talent alone doesn't get you, or it can get you in the door, but your work ethic, your hard work, or how hard you work and a lot of things are what keep you in there. And that's kind of the settings that like set the tone for me throughout my collegiate career. Cause my first 2 years were not that good, but then my third and fourth were my best years. And I think as I grew and as I came to realize that there are certain aspects of being a professional or being a athlete that are bigger than just, oh, what does he do just on the ball or without the ball or this and that. There are a lot of intricate things, whether it's mentally, emotionally, that you have to keep in check to be able to perform at that high level.
Yeah, and I know you won some accolades in those later years, especially that junior year. I think you really lit it up. You kind of had to balance college. I think you were doing PDL at the time. I think the Carolina Dynamo, which, it's hilarious. Dynamo, it seems to be a theme a little bit, but that's now the North Carolina Fusion U23 team. I always throw those in there. And then you were still getting called in, I think, to 20 camp.
Yeah.
Yeah, different things. So you kind of had a lot on your plate. And I think a lot of people don't realize, when guys go to college that they have college, they have all these different responsibilities. But in your case, you had a bunch of different things where you're getting pulled away for things that I'd have to imagine the teachers are not real sympathetic towards. If you say, hey, I'm going to go represent our country, and they're like, I'm here to teach you. I'm not here to, let you miss class because, but I'm assuming they worked with you. How did you handle all that responsibility kind of at a young age?
We had obviously like administrators that kind of helped us a lot with that. Yeah, but at the same time, it was just kind of me having to just email teachers and be like, hey, like you just said, like I'm representing the US in this tournament. I'll be gone for 3 weeks or a month. And a lot of times I'd either have to drop our class because they're just like, hey, you can't miss that much class time and expect to succeed. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Or I have to drop the class, or they'd be able to work with me and be like, hey, that's fine. We understand. Just as long as you keep up with the reading and turning your assignments, that could be fine. So yeah, a lot of times when I was away on those trips, I was still doing work. So it was still just a balancing act for sure.
And how much of your vision for yourself was focused on finishing and getting a degree versus, hey, I want to be, my goal is to be a professional soccer player. Like, where did you feel you were at, in terms of getting to the next level? Were you hearing a lot of buzz like, oh, I'm gonna, get an offer here, or what was your mindset?
Yeah, I think my first year, I didn't really think much about it. And then after my second and third year, I was very adamant on leaving. I wanted to leave and go to Houston at the time because I was homegrown. So I'd been there and just be in that environment at a younger age. And my parents were just like, no, you go to a really good school. It doesn't make sense at this point for you to leave. And so that's when I decided, I was like, okay, let me just fast track it then and just take on a bigger academic load to try and graduate as early as I can. So I ended up graduating just a semester early, but that's half a year. So like, yeah, it gave me an extra half a year into my playing career.
Yeah, and I think you graduated, is it Earth and Ocean Sciences? Is that your degree?
Yeah.
All right. I've got a joke about going across the pond here for you, but only you smart guys, me and you will get that. Not everyone else. But how did you end up? So your path, you're thinking I'm going to go to the Dynamo because I'm homegrown. They have your rights. How did you end up? You end up in Europe and you end up across the pond and you end up in Denmark. How does that happen where you're thinking, okay, I'm lighting it up. I'm ACC Defender of the Year type stuff, and now I'm going over to play in Europe.
Yeah, it was actually my agent at the time. We kind of just sat down and really looked at what my skill sets were and what I needed to work on. And that's kind of how we came on the decision to go to Denmark, because obviously the MLS is an extremely athletic league. And we kind of identified that what I didn't really need at the time is to be in an athletic league where my technical ability wouldn't really have to shine as much. And so we went to literally a league that was complete opposite, where I could dominate athletically, but it was more about tactics and more technical ability. And that's kind of, again, still the developmental part. Although I was a pro, it was still about developing certain aspects of my game that I was deficient in. And that's kind of how we ended up landing in Denmark. And I was there for, I think, a year and a half or something like that. And yeah, and that's just kind of how it ended up. Yeah.
Well, before we go through that, I mean, it had to be a pretty good feeling though, signing, you have this dream of, I want to do this. It sounds like you made a pretty, a serious decision at 16, 17 to make a commitment to it. So it had to feel pretty good signing that first contract.
Oh yeah. No, I was beyond excited about it. It was, like you just said, it was literally what I wanted to do since I was very little. And then obviously a re-emerging dream when I realized it could actually be done. So then once it was finally done, I understood I was nowhere near where I wanted to be, but it was definitely a huge hurdle that I, got over, and I was super excited.
Well, that's that's awesome. You talked about being there for an extended period of time. You kind of get loaned out. You play games, and that's the biggest thing I think. It seems like with your career, other than ironically the Houston Dynamo, everywhere you've been, you're at least getting minutes. You're at least getting some burn, some game. You get loaned out there. I think you were one team. I'm not even going to try to Fredericia.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. And then the other one was that was in Denmark as well, another Danish side. And then you go to Reykjavik, which is in Iceland. And I think that was from, and I might be saying that one wrong, but what was that doing for you? I have to imagine it's pretty hard being away from home, away from where you're comfortable. And then now you're kind of getting moved around. You're going to a different country and you're playing there, but also it's kind of a unique experience. How did you look at those opportunities?
Yeah, no, I definitely looked at them more on the side of the unique opportunities. I looked at it as it's part of, the career I chose. I was at Corson's and a new coach came in and literally said, "Oh, I don't think you fit." And I was like, "Okay, well, I need to go find minutes elsewhere." So it was never a thing where I was like, "Oh, I hate that I'm doing this." I just understood it as the career I chose and what I wanted to do. And this is kind of just something that comes with it. And then in addition to that, it's just being able to travel like that too was kind of cool. I had never been to Iceland before. I'd never been to Reykjavik. So then I go there and I'm there for 8 months or almost a year. And I had a great experience there with the team, with just the culture, with everything. And I don't think that would have been something I would have ever done. And so on both sides of that, I looked at all of it as a really cool opportunity to take.
Yeah, that's like a bucket list trip for me. And you were just like, "Oh, I'm getting loaned out."
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. Well, how'd you end up, let's talk about how you end up deciding to come back. I think Matt Jordan was the GM for the Dynamo. How did you end up getting pulled back into MLS?
So yeah, after playing at Fram, I came back obviously with no club, and we were kind of talking to certain clubs, and I think who was the coach at? But Red Bull. I don't know how somehow Red Bull came into the conversation, and so like, hey, I think I was in New York at the time, just kind of hanging out. And like, hey, come to training. You're right here already. We'll have you for a couple of weeks, and then we'll kind of just go from there. And I was like, okay, cool. So I went and trained, and I'm not really sure what happened, but I guess Matt or Houston, heard that I was training with another MLS team, and they obviously still had my rights, I believe. So I guess they just kind of called over and like, hey, if you want him, you have to pay this. And I think Red Bull were like, I don't know. And then next, I'm back in Houston a couple of weeks later, and then Matt is like, hey, come train. It's the end of the season. Come train. We're training for a couple more weeks. Come train. And I was like, okay, cool. Didn't really think much about it. Went in, trained, and then they're like, yeah, we're going to offer you a home contract. And yeah, and I was like, oh, well, this is awesome. I'm back in my hometown playing for the team I grew up playing with. Like, so for me, I was really happy about it. And then, kind of I didn't play, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I feel like it's like the jealous girlfriend type thing where, you're in New York and they're like, that's our guy, and then they bring you in. And you've been vocal in some of the things I've seen over the years, where you talk about, you're kind of now in that leader role, and that you've got, 10 years or more under your belt, where guys that are younger, you're ancient to them. To me, you're not an old guy. You got a lot of years left and a lot of opportunity, but you've been pretty vocal about, you think having a chip on your shoulder is a healthy thing. I can't help but think that, I say guys have chips on their shoulders for things. Sometimes they have to create, you manufacture motivation, but in your case, the Dynamo kind of helped you create a pretty good chip in that they don't give you an opportunity to play. And, you were loaned out in the Danish league, and then you come back to Houston and your hometown in terms of your family and friends, people and you don't really get any opportunity to play. And they loan you out to RGV, which is Rio Grande Valley, and then eventually to Rayo, OKC, and Oklahoma, in the NASL. Was that really where you kind of got a lot of, I would imagine that was some pretty good motivation that hey, you know what, now I'm going to go be really successful and show these guys that they made a mistake?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's a lot of what has fueled my career and still does, is still trying to prove that I belong in this league and that I'm better than whatever people think. I don't really care what people think, but I just know that I always want to be better and I always want to progress my own game. And I think, that Houston stint I had, and then going on those several loans and then playing in San Antonio, all of that is kind of a culmination of where I got like that chip on my shoulder for sure.
Yeah, and San Antonio was, I've been very vocal in terms of, I think guys should go where they're going to play. And I would argue, I played with guys a lot that they were 19 on the roster, right? They're not even dressing, but they're not getting to go away because they might have to be on the roster, and they don't, they're not in shape, and they're, now they're doing better at running guys and keeping it fit and stuff. But I always said, if you have a chance to go play actual minutes and be involved, that's going to do so much for you, where maybe you're going to get an opportunity and people will see what you can do. And I can't think of a better example than what you did in San Antonio, where you absolutely light it up. You were like a best 11 in the year you played. You get Defender of the Year. You're part of a record-breaking defense that, goals against. I think y'all had like some crazy 7-8 games, you didn't give up a goal, and I feel like you really put yourself on the map. And a lot of guys looked at it as like, oh, I don't want to go down to USL because I think that's a step back. I'm an MLS guy, but in your case, it was actually that move that made everyone realize like, this he's lighting it up. He needs to have another chance.
Yeah, no, 100%. That, and I love San Antonio FC. I think it was a great year. It was one of the better teams I played on too. And I know I've played on a couple MLS teams and stuff. Just the way it was run with my teammates, with the coaches, it was all great. And we had a really, really good team, and we were just confident in how we played. And our coach, Darren, who's actually now at Inter Miami, just kind of let us, be ourselves and kind of run the team the way we wanted to. And that's kind of where I became very comfortable in the system. And again, still learned a lot of stuff about my play and how I want to play and knowing what I need around me to play well. And and we ended up, like you just said, lighting it up defensively and having a really, really good season.
So what happens next there? I mean, how do you end up going from there to NYCFC?
Somehow we were affiliated with NYCFC. I don't really know exactly how. And so, after that year, obviously it hits off season. And then the next season, I don't think I had signed with San Antonio yet, but New York is like, hey, you can come in the preseason and kind of just see how things go. So I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, I'm not going to turn that down. So I went there, I think we went to Florida, trained there for a month or so. And then, I did pretty well in the games. And Patrick and I think it was Claudio at the time was the GM. They're like, we want to get you on here. We don't see you as number 2, more like a number 3 and 4. But, obviously there's always the idea that if you work and you do well enough, you'll be in an 11 or and you know how it is. And so it was just kind of one of those. And I was like, all right, cool. And I just kind of went to New York and still with the same chip and just worked. And got, like you just said, got some minutes and then got some stints where I started a couple games and stuff like that. Yeah. And just kind of grinded away.
Yeah. And NYCFC was, I still say that I think they're one of the, cream of the crop in terms of one of the MLS teams, especially in the East, where they have an identity and they have an idea. They spend some money. I would have to imagine that you went from played with good players in certain places, but you now go to a place where there's world-class players, not just the guys that people know, but I mean, you had some international guys, that maybe they're not household names, but they're playing for their national team in big tournaments in Europe and South America. Those are the guys you're competing against now. And obviously we know where you're at now. You lifted your game and you showed up, but it had to be pretty cool too, saying, now I'm in the show, but not only am I in the show, like I'm in the show with some really good players and I'm holding my own.
Yeah, no, it was, I mean, you come in and David Villa is one of your teammates and you're like, wow, I literally was watching you in the World Cup. Patrick Vieira is your head coach. And it was like, you were like one of the guys I watched growing up again playing. And so it was crazy just to be in that environment and again, see how different it was run. It's always crazy to me to go to different teams and see how it's run because we all do the same thing. But just the daily operations are just little things are just so different. And so, it was kind of just a cool experience to definitely be in there. And again, being one of the, like you said, like one of the teams that know their identity and don't really care about anyone else. They just care about how they play. And this is how we do our thing. It was definitely engaging and definitely, and I loved it. Yeah.
Well, I know you played 60 games or 60 plus games there, which is awesome. And the year that you, on one hand, it's bittersweet because you helped this team become who they are and they're, a force to be reckoned with. And you end up, LAFC trades for you. And I know a lot of people are familiar with, you get traded and then they go and they win MLS Cup. I'm just curious. It's just for my own personal knowledge. I know that sometimes guys, they don't necessarily get a ring, but if you participate in enough things, you might get some kind of bonus money. Did you at least get anything?
I got a ring.
Oh, you got a ring. Okay. Yeah, I know that if you participate enough, you get something. And I was hoping that, I think I saw a thing with you and Max Bretos and he made it was like so depressing because he was kind of like trying to be, funny. And then it was just like, he still was part of that team. It was just, he just didn't, and I was like, there are guys that they don't play a single game the whole year and then something. And then like he played and he got them to where they were. And so you got a ring. So congrats there.
Thank you. Yeah, it was cool. I was also like very like cool and surreal to watch them playing in that final. I was losing my mind just watching them play. So it was a lot of fun. And I was like texting them as they were playing, like telling them about, like, it was so much fun to watch. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's big of you. I'm not sure I would have been rooting for him, but that's the pettiness in me.
Mutual separation.
I get it.
Yeah.
Well, so you have to be happy though, because you're now I always say you go from the cream of the crop on the East to the new boys in town and the cream of the crop in the West. You know, and I do like the John Thorrington story, and that you know, when they ended up winning, can you tell the listeners what he told you and kind of foreshadow?
Yeah, so obviously we're in off season because we didn't make the playoffs, so we're all watching the playoffs and MLS Cup. And then we come in next year, or I guess this was 2022 last year, in preseason. I'm just like rolling out in the gym or something, and John like walks up and he's just like, "I'm sorry," and I was like, "For what?" And he's like, "New York won, we took you away, but like I promise we're gonna get a ring this year." And I was just kind of like, "Okay, cool, like I appreciate that. We'll see what happens." Kind of like, obviously you have no idea. It's January, like, and yeah. And then literally at the end of the year, I look at him, I was like, "That's actually wild that we went and got this ring," right?
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I think that's a great story, and you know, it's a vibe, right? And
Sure.
speaking of that, you know, you'd hinted at earlier. You said you were just when you were in the off season from coming back from Iceland, you were in New York. You know, for those that know you, you know, you have a really, you know, big personality, and I would say like I call it a big city vibe.
Yeah.
You know, and you go to New York and then you go to LA. I'd have to imagine from a lifestyle standpoint that you're pretty much feeling pretty good about you know, where you're at. You know, there are worse places to be than those two cities in MLS.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I mean, it was me when I signed with New York. It was my first time really I lived in New Jersey, but living in that area. And so I loved it. It was definitely a change of pace. And yeah, I think I fit in pretty well there. And then again, going to LA, it's a little bit calmer than New York, but yeah, it's still that, like you just said, big city type feel. I lived a little bit south in the South Bay at Hermosa Beach, so it's kind of secluded away from a lot of stuff. But no, I loved it. It was definitely more my vibe. And yeah, I vibe with both cities for sure.
All right. Well, then, you know, you come into an LAFC team that they had some real studs as well all over the field, especially in the defensive areas. You play for a coach that I'm not a big fan of rotations. Of you know, I'm a continuity person, but I think that this is more of a newer thing where you give guys rest and you want to see what other guys can do. Different pairings make sense. And I think it really served the team really well, because not only did y'all win the Supporter Shield, but come MLS Cup playoffs, your name gets called and you essentially are the guy in the final, you know, and you play and win the greatest MLS game ever played. You know, talk to me just a little bit about that mentality of, you know, you have confidence in yourself. You've got a coach that has confidence in you, and that he knows, hey, if this guy's, you know, if this guy goes down, you're up. You know, if you go down, the next guy up is ready to go. That had to be pretty cool for you.
Yeah, no, 100%. It was kind of one of the first teams where I had that feeling where it was like literally anyone who wasn't playing could easily start. And it wasn't just, oh yeah, like you're just saying it, but no, like you wrote down the guys on paper and you're like, yeah, someone's hurt. It's like, oh yeah, just plug and play, put this guy in, it'll be fine. Like nothing changes. We're playing the exact same way. So it was great. I mean, and that's kind of what happened. I think it was Western Conference Final. Giorgio comes up with a little calf injury. So they look at me like, hey, you might have to go in at halftime. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like we'll see what happens. And then, yeah, so I'm literally just sitting in the locker room at halftime and they're like, yeah, you're going in. And that's like literally it. There's no like, oh, it's like, yeah, you'll be good. Just go in. Cool. Warm up. And then same with the final. They wanted to see if Giorgio was okay. I actually didn't know I was starting that final until I got into the locker room and they checked Giorgio and like, yeah, Seb, you're starting. And I was like, okay, like, let's get it. Like, it's cool. And so, yeah, it was just an insane amount of confidence that was in that locker room at all times, just because of how, you know, Steve spoke to us and how trainings were and how kind of everyone was kind of just in the same playing field. and how we all thought in the same manner and ways. Yeah.
Do you think if you had known you were starting, it would have made you a little more nervous before then, or was it? I mean, you kind of have to prepare, like you're gonna play, but there's a difference between like when you go and you see your name on the board and you're like, all right, I'm starting. Like, that's when it's real, right? I mean,
yeah. But even the way Steve did it was so nonchalant that I was like, oh, okay. Like I literally walked in, and I guess he was just leaving like the training room, and he just sees me and he just points at me. But he was talking to someone else, and he just keeps walking. And I think he was talking to one of the assistant coaches, and they go, "Oh yeah, you're starting." And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, cool." I couldn't even be like there was no real time to like think about it. It was like, "Oh, okay." He did that very nonchalantly, so he's fine with it. So I'm fine with it. Like, yeah. So it was very interesting locker room, and that's kind of why I actually respect Steve a lot as a coach, is that he's able to manage his players in a way that they understand that they're still great players, and it's just about finding your role and excelling in that role.
Yeah, well, that you excelled, and congrats. There aren't a lot of people that can say they've won both of those, and there sure as heck aren't a lot that can say they did it in the same year. So, talk to me a little bit about the off season, because you're a free agent at that point. Where's your head at? What are you hearing? What are you thinking? And obviously we know you end up in Dallas, but what was your mindset going into that off season? You have to be on a high and knowing I just balled out, and everyone saw it. So it's like, obviously I'm gonna have something come on my plate here.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. That was kind of my thing. Was I thought last season was one of my better seasons for sure. I think in midsummer I played 7-8 games in a row, and I had some continuity in that sense. And so it was like, oh, you can actually play and put together performances, instead of like the 1-2 games and then not playing for 3-4 and then again. And then, obviously with the playoffs and then how MLS Cup went, it was crazy. And I thought I played really well. So I was like, I know a team will come call it. I just don't know which team. And hopefully multiple teams come and I get to pick. And then that kind of is where I go from there. But out the gate, when free agency opened, Dallas was like on it, and they're like, "Hey, we want you here." And I was like, "Okay, like I want to give LA a chance. Obviously, I'm a free agent. I've just played there, and out of respect, I want them to kind of, hear their offer out too at the same time." And then I think a couple other teams came in, but my agent was like, I really think these are the two teams that we should look at. And and Dallas just kept kind of putting the pressure on, like, no, we really want you here, like this. And then at the end of the day, it actually came down to my family. My parents are still in Houston, and then my brother and his family are in Oklahoma City. And being in Dallas really puts me right in between them. So it was one of those where kind of all the off-field stuff kind of played the biggest role in it. And I was like, my parents always want to come to games. They haven't been to a game in like 4 or 5 years because I've been literally in New York and then LA. Dallas puts me right here. And then my brother, who I don't see as much too, because I've been coast to coast, he's also right there. So that's kind of how Dallas ended up happening. And and then literally we were in the 5th game. I think my parents have been to 4 games already. And so, it was just kind of, it all worked out in the craziest way. Yeah.
I was going to say they have no excuses now.
Yeah.
If they don't show up. And you started off well. And I thought I had this wrong. So I'm going to ask, was it your first goal?
It was my first MLS goal. Yeah.
That was your first MLS goal.
Yeah.
I know you scored a ton in college, but I was like, there's no way that's true.
Yeah.
But I guess for the league play, that's that's your first goal.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, you acted like you scored 100. You just pointing like, I've done this a million times. Like I play forward too, But that's awesome. Well, talk to me. What's I talked about you got a long runway ahead of you. You've arguably won the hardware that everyone chases. So what's next in your journey? Like where do you want to see your career go from here?
I think from a career standpoint, I just don't think I've reached my ceiling as a player. I think I can still develop. I think there's still things in my game that can get better. And so for me, in that sense, that's kind of the biggest thing. But at the same time, and that's kind of another reason why I chose Dallas, is that it's such a young team. And I feel like I've told you, I'm a big speaker on, making good environments for players. And I think for me, it's being someone in a locker room that can help players now that I am older. And so that's what it is. It's looking at certain situations, guys, and being like, hey, think about the game like this, or on the field, or even off the field stuff. And so that's kind of what I've been trying to train myself, is to get into a role of a mentor as well as just a player. Because I think growing up, being in the academy and being around like you guys, kind of, not that you guys actively did anything, but it's just kind of seeing how you guys acted and how you guys conducted yourself. Like that helped me a lot. And so I think every locker room needs people like that, whether they speak out about it a lot or they just show it, whichever way they choose to. I think it's huge. And that's kind of what I kind of loved about coming to Dallas, that it was such a young team, right? And being an older guy, I think I'm second oldest on this team, regardless of, if I play or I don't play, it's how do I conduct myself every training session so they see that, okay, even if I'm not playing, I'm not just completely disengaged and don't care, and I'm just like in and out of locker room. Like I still take the time to take care of my body, to do this or that, no matter what's happening or whatever it is. I just think there's certain nuances to being a professional and being in a locker room that can be overlooked if you don't have a player who has put in that time and understands those things.
Yeah, that's a good mentality. It's crazy to think your team is that young.
Yeah.
But that's really cool. We'll wrap it up here. We got a couple more things for you. You played in the New York Derby.
Yeah.
You've been a part of the LA Derby. So now I would have to imagine, considering we talked about chip on your shoulder, there's a little bit of Dynamo animosity. You're going to be, Dallas has got, really, you've got three.
Yeah.
Houston's a big one. I would say yes, Sporting could be a pretty big one. And now you've got this new Austin one.
Yeah.
Which game is circled on your calendar? Is it a former team? Like, is it a LAFC? Is it a NYCFC? Is it a Dynamo? Like, when you saw the schedule, who are you circling saying, I want to be on the field and smash this team?
LAFC, I wouldn't say to like smash them per se. Like I just wanted to be, because I hadn't played an away game in, I guess now it's BMO Stadium, and just kind of going back there. I hadn't been back there obviously since we won. So just going back there was like, that was circled for that reason, being back in that environment, seeing all those guys again, playing against them, which is always, I always have a lot of fun playing against those guys. Definitely Austin, because one of my good friends plays at Austin, and they smacked us last year away, even though I was on LA, not Dallas, but still.
Yeah, it stings.
Yeah, I always want to smack Austin. And then...
Well, you got your retribution in the one that mattered.
We did. But I only played half. I want to play like a full game. And just have like...
Okay. And how politically correct are you that I said smash them and you were like, no, hold on, that's like, you're so veteran that you're like, I can't have the word smash be involved with this. You're like, I just want to play them and win. And I set you up there, and I apologize. That was not my goal. I've regretted it.
I just don't want any words to be taken, and then,
but your experience, I forget. You've been doing this. You know what to do. So last one I got for you. So let's talk about off the field. Yeah, friend of mine is Alexis Guerrero's from the Cooligans. He said about you, I think I've talked to him about you, and then we actually were, I think, at an all-star game, or I saw you, and he looked at you and he said, this guy is just a whole vibe, right? And I was like, you know what? That's like a really cool way. I'm not even sure, like, I understand what that actually means, right? But I was like, I guarantee you no one's ever called me like a whole vibe, right? And I know you're very active in the fashion world. You're on Instagram, and you're on these, you have some media stuff that people make videos, and you're very open about, your fashion. And it's really cool. Talk to me a little bit about how you created that identity for yourself. And, it seems like teams are really focusing, not just in MLS, but in sports, on, pregame outfits and the fashion and the culture side of it. And I feel like there's a couple guys in MLS that are really pushing that movement, and you're one of those guys. And like, what does that mean to you?
I mean, fashion and just all that, like you just kind of said, it to me is like an extension of culture and just kind of an extension of who I am. It's just a way to express myself. And for me, I'm really happy to see like the league kind of putting more respect on that aspect too. Like, yes, we are players and that's kind of our main role, but some of us are also artists and also fashion guys, musicians. Like, I think like just players in general are so diverse in the things they like and the things they do off the field that I think you can create millions of stories just based on those things. And it's like, and they also can play. And so that was kind of what my thing is just expressing myself and hoping that other people pick up, as Alexis does, on the vibe and they're like, oh yeah, I'll roll with it. Like, I like this. And that's kind of all it is. And I just like that more players are expressing themselves and are open to expressing themselves and not being so closed. And that's kind of what my thing is that it gives you a little glimpse into who I am and what I like and how, and the things I look to do maybe when I'm not playing or when just in my off time and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's great. I think it shows, that's one of the goals of this podcast is to show that there's a human element to these guys, and that they're human as well. They want to they have families and they have lives and passions outside of the game. So I want to thank you again for your time. You're as cool as they come. It was great for us to catch up on here, and good luck to you the rest of this year and the years beyond. We'll be following it, and I know our listeners are really going to enjoy hearing your journey. So, Sebastien Ibeagha, everybody.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Play by Players. Visit playbyplayerspod.com for more episodes or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
This has been a production of the MLSPA. Learn more at mlsplayers.org.